Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tree Actions, the Human Forestry Podcast. And with me, as always, is my trusted co-host, Tony Tresselt. And joining us today from the somewhere in Nebraska, I believe, is my good friend and longtime colleague, Mr. affectionately known as Nebraska Jack Phillips. Hello, Jack. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Yes, I haven't heard that moniker for a while. I think it was, I don't know where they came up with that. Was it maybe in
It was
Ottawa
Ottawa.
where the guys started calling
Yeah,
you
the
that? Yeah,
Ottawa guys
yeah,
dubbed you Nebraska Jack, and
yeah.
that was what year was that? We kind of did a tour of tree biology across the country for a couple years there, and the Nebraska Jack moniker just kind of stuck. What year was that?
We did that. We did that program together in Vegas,
Right.
and that was in 2005. And it was shortly after that, so maybe
Yeah, that's right.
2007. I'm not really
Yeah,
sure,
you're right.
Dwayne.
It was a while ago. It was. Yeah, but well, I'm sure we'll get to all the juicy stuff and the juicy connections. We always like to start our podcast off with a question for our guest as it to get things rolling. And the question is, when is the first time that you have a conscious recollection of connecting with trees or a tree?
Wow, it's hard for me to think of any childhood experience that wasn't in the woods. Um, I, you know, I wasn't raised by wolves, but basically raised in a canoe. And my father was just absolutely in love with nature, and his two brothers as well. And the three of them kind of raised me. My mother too. I mean, but she wasn't quite as outdoorsy.
Okay.
Um, but anyway, I it's hard for me to think of any childhood memory that doesn't involve a tree or a river or a turtle. Um, and if you can indulge me just for a second, I recently published a very short essay about this because I had invited one of the local English professors to come and spend some time with us. And he had a writing exercise for us, and it was basically a very similar to question to what you've asked. But this had to do with what is your earliest childhood memory of
Okay.
nature? And I got kind of stuck. I didn't go back as far as I could go, but there was this one incident that stuck in my head, and I think maybe I was about 4 years old. And when I was a little boy, and actually it still kind of happens, when I have a very clear dream, I have to check it out the next day to see if it actually happened, right? So if there's somebody in the dream or something happens in the dream, I have to go see
Wow.
if it really happened. Because I know it didn't happen. I know it was a dream, but I just have this nagging feeling that I need to talk to that person or go to that place or, sit by that pond or something. So I don't know. I was very small, 4 years old maybe. And I had this very simple dream that in our driveway there was a box turtle. So, um, Dwayne, I don't know if you have box turtles. So it's a terrestrial turtle. It's a land turtle.
Yeah, yeah.
You could call it a tortoise. I guess maybe in Alberta, I don't know if you have those.
No, well, I don't.
Tony, you would have them where you are.
Mhm.
You would have the eastern box turtle. Here we have what is called the ornate box turtle. Anyway, although the eastern box turtle was here and has since disappeared from this part of its range, And this turtle in my dream very explicitly was an eastern box turtle. I remember it so clearly. So I woke up in the morning and went out to the driveway and just to see if there were a box turtle in the driveway. And there was not. There was not a box turtle in the driveway, but there was a giant toad
Oh wow.
right in the place where I had dreamt of the box turtle. So I fed her a cricket,
Uh-huh.
as one does. Now, I don't know why that, I never remember my dreams, but to this day, I remember that dream so clearly and then what happened the next morning. So, and we lived in the woods where our house was right up against a creek. And of course, that's all gone now. Everything wild in eastern Nebraska is pretty much gone at this point. But it was kind of a wild place growing up. But I have lots of tree memories. We were climbing trees all the time. Yeah, I had favorite trees. I still do. Uh, but it's funny you would ask that because I just wrote about that fairly recently and thought about that. How about for you, Dwayne? What is your earliest tree memory?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. The only two species were it was Caragana and Manitoba maple shelter belt.
Uh huh.
And there might have been some poplars in there, but I think, yeah, I think it had, just the. I'm not sure how I would describe it, but the idea of, it's almost like another place, where you would go. Obviously I was shorter, right? So you pathways that deer make and so on are like, you can quite easily navigate them like they do. Yeah, unlike you can as an adult, and so you almost have this world of paths and corridors and even resting places where you can see where they sleep or lay, and you can sit in it and fit, and it wasn't that big of an area because it was the middle of the prairies, but it was surrounding the entire farmyard. So and just it's fascinating to me the intricacies that you'll notice of all the spent caragana pods and leaves on the ground and the textures that go with that. um Things you kind of just you don't I don't know, I don't notice it as much in as an adult, I guess, but how every little thing has a uniqueness to it, and ultimately basically finding a stick that best resembled some type of weapon, preferably a machine gun, and
That's
and then running around playing like some type of war game, basically. Uh,
right.
and it's funny because it never, there's the Call of Duty game just seems horrific to me. That video gets so realistic and so on, and yet, I grew up playing games like that in my mind, as vivid as that, all the time, without any stimulus from the phone, internet, or anything like that. So it's quite interesting. But yeah, I think that's where it would have meant for me is the not knowing the names or anything else, but just it was a refuge. I think, like for a lot of people, when we ask people, well, obviously for a lot of us, it goes to a young age, into that
Yeah.
place, and we call it the Human Forestry Podcast because um, it was just one of our newer instructors. We were closing off a team event, and he just made the comment. We all interlocked arms and made a circle, and just were kind of saying our goodbyes. And he said, "Well, here I am, joining this forest of." He said, "I feel like a young tree or a sapling in this forest of giants," and I thought, how much like us and everyone we know is like part of a forest. And some of us are older trees and we're different types of trees, but we're all connected, in different ways, and, connected spiritually or energetically, like the way tree roots are connected underground, and not just from one species to species, but interspecially, and drawing on that concept, which, is an easy stretch for me. The first time that I felt, I'm not sure the right word is, that my mind was expanded into thinking of trees from a spiritual or philosophical side. That, like, my first exposure to that, I'd have to credit to you, Jack, and next to you, Tony. Where philosophy plays a role in discussion in amongst talking about trees and teaching about trees. So, and it's really the impetus for the podcast, really.
Yeah. Well, and um, it makes perfect sense to me. But let me just ask you just a little bit more about this experience that you had as a child. And you talked about feeling safe in that sort of secret place that you had.
Uh-huh.
Um, did you feel a special kind of connection with those other creatures, the trees and the other whatever was there in that shelter belt? Did you feel a connection there that um, has been a little bit harder to feel as an adult?
I think that it would say that it comes easier to a young mind, uh, and and it's also not. I think the biggest thing is it's free of judgment. There isn't a questioning as to why you're having the thought or the feeling. You just go with it,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
as you get older and enlightened, so to speak, you think that you have to, put it in some type of. It has to fit somewhere. And what's interesting, and I don't know if you're experiencing this, but as you get older, or ill, when there's something that takes you out of the day to day, what we could call the rat race or whatever you want to term it as, where you're forced either to give pause due to circumstances such as illness, or if you're, or extreme stress, or if you're just reaching that stage for whatever reason, you find it easier to go back to that. It isn't as important that there's a reason anymore.
yeah. We look for reasons and rationale, and somehow we have to justify it that to ourselves or to our families or an employer or someone.
Hmm.
And I started thinking about this in a very specific way when Dwayne we were in
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Tabor, Alberta.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember the people that were there, but we had, as always, there were some forestry people, and there were some field men, and there were some urban forestry folks, local
Yeah.
arborists. But there was a young man, uh, a First Nations man
Yeah.
from the Siksika
Yes.
Nation. And he was there because there had been a flood where they lived,
Yeah.
and they lost a lot of trees. And he really wanted to know how to reestablish the part of the ecosystem that had been lost in this flood.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember his name, but and that was the same workshop where I really wanted to do more with the kind of the BioBlitz concept that we've been working with.
Yeah.
And if you recall, um, in addition to having everyone draw trees, which we always had people draw trees and put them up
Yeah.
around the room.
Yeah.
I don't know, Tony, if I guess you haven't been in one of those workshops, but we would begin by having people draw with lots of, colors that we had available to them. They had to draw a tree,
Yeah.
just draw a tree, and we would tape them up around the room.
Yeah.
And then, gosh, we did this so many times. And then at the end of the workshop, whether it was 2 or 3 days or whatever, we would have everyone draw another tree
Yeah. Yeah.
and put those trees up with the other ones. And it was interesting to see how their ideas about trees had changed.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things that would happen is that almost invariably, the tree, of course, was more complete, and they had actually drawn a root system, which many of the trees didn't have them initially.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that was interesting was that in their drawing of the tree, there were more creatures. There were birds, and there might be a deer, or some people were trying to draw microbes, and
Mm-hmm.
people were trying to draw mycorrhizal fungi, and all kinds of different things. The things that we had talked about and seen through the microscope, nematodes or whatever. And it was an amazing change. So I started to think, and this comes right back to what you were saying, Dwayne. I started to realize that, well, maybe what I need to be doing with people is to help them reconnect with that naturalist within. Because when we were out in the field and everybody was just told to just find anything that they could find and bring it back. And by the way, I learned that from Shigo, because that's what he would have people do in his workshops.
Mm-hmm.
Just go to the woods and fill up this bag and come back and let's talk about what's in the bag.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't put the tree in the bag. So you ended up talking about everything else. Um, and so when you were in that shelter belt, Dwayne, and you were sort of with all those other creatures, um, I can't really say what you felt. I don't know. I know what I felt at that age when I was in the woods. But now my work is to help people to remember that feeling and to rekindle that feeling and that sense of connection. So everything I do now has to do with helping people to restore that natural connection that most people have. And even people that grow up right in the middle of the city, it's amazing they still have that inside them.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask somebody that grew up in Brooklyn or in Los Angeles in a completely urban environment and ask them to talk about their relationships with other than human creatures. And they still have those stories. And those stories are really no different than the stories from somebody that just grew up in the middle of the woods. It's that we have that connection just right innate to us. And remember, Dwayne, we in that workshop or in one of them, I started to introduce the idea that was coined by the phrase that was coined by the scientist E.O. Wilson, and that's the word called biophilia.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right? So, like, Tony, Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, or something like that. Well, biophilia just simply means the love of nature, and his belief and his writings were all centered around. By the way, he was an entomologist; he wasn't a psychologist. Centered around this innate need for humans to connect with creatures that are not human. And it's astonishing how everybody has that inside of them. You kind of have to coax it out sometimes. So this is why we do lots of yoga and lots of meditation and write poetry and do some readings, because all of those things get us into a different frame of mind that might open us up a little differently uh, to those connections. So that's really great to hear about that, Dwayne. You're the secret world. Tony, you must have had some kind of young experiences. You grew up in Pennsylvania, right?
I think about this question a lot because we ask it all the time. And but there's no. I don't have a lot of childhood memories for various reasons, but there is no single defining time around trees. I grew up outside a lot. One, because my father was an arborist since the year I was born, but he came from a forestry background, so trees and scouting and camping and hiking was always a very big part of how he brought me and my two brothers up. So that was always a huge thing. So I've always been very much part of nature, but I never really singled out trees. And I've never been on the outside looking in for arboriculture. I've never known a world without arborists. My dad would take me to work when I was very young, play hooky from school. And I've seen guys doing tree work for as long as I can remember. So when it came to choosing a career field, I call myself a reluctantly incidental arborist. It was not something I chose. It was, just kind of happened. In fact, I tried actively not to do it. It wasn't, but why did I become an arborist then becomes the question. And for me, it really became I needed a tribe. I was at a point in my life through, my military experiences and then leaving the military and getting out. I just needed a group, and arboriculture was one that offered that to me. And unlike any other industry, I think I could have gotten into. It wasn't until, probably fairly deep and not deep, but in the midterms of my arborist career, that I really started to look at trees as not just something I was working on, but something that could have been, that was more. And now being older, looking back, it's one of the gifts of getting a little bit older is that perspective, right? So now I see them differently, and I understand why I ended up where I ended up, which was, worked out well in the long run. So I don't have a one specific tree memory, and now having worked on trees for 30 plus years, they've all just blended together.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Well, but see, that's the thing. Remember, Dwayne, Alex was always saying trees are not individuals.
No.
So, it is actually seems quite natural, Tony, for you to think of a world full of trees rather than just a particular tree in the world, and to have that sense and that longing to belong to a tribe, right? So when we talk about the sacred hoop, just going back to what we did yesterday, and that's just on my mind because we did it yesterday. In the vision, I don't know if you know the story, but as a young boy, he had this vision.
You're talking about black elk now, right, Jack?
About black elk, right?
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
and and it's really a wonderful thing to read. And even if you just get a copy of Black Elk Speaks and you just read the chapter that describes the great vision, it's well worth doing, and you'll resonate with all kinds of things in there. So he's in his vision, he's on a horse, and there's all kinds of stuff going on, and there's all sorts of ancestor spirits and animals and everyone talking and singing and so forth. But then in front of him, there's a rainbow that appears, and kind of a portal under the rainbow. So he goes through what he describes as the rainbow door. And then he sees that the tree of life, which is there all the time, isn't just the tree of life of his people, it's the tree of life of the cosmos. So all of a sudden, it goes from being a dream that is about his own immediate family and the tribe, to seeing that tribe really expands out into a sacred hoop that includes all living things. So it makes all kinds of sense for somebody that grows up close to nature not to start with one tree and expand out, but maybe even to start with the whole group. And then sometimes we have to think about a particular tree. Sometimes it almost seems like it works in the reverse, especially thinking back, going back to trying to uncover an experience. So, yeah, I understand. I understand that need for a tribe, Tony. That is just something we all need. We all need to have those kinds of relationships that sustain us. I mean, that's, to state the obvious. But my work is to help people to understand that those sustaining relationships um, go beyond our human relationships, and that we can start to recover a sense of kinship with other creatures, which many of us grew up with that sense anyway. So if you ask a small child just to talk about, have you ever seen a tadpole, or have you ever seen a mouse, or have you ever just ask a small child and ask them to talk about it, they oftentimes will develop this into a story that involves relating to that mouse or that frog or that tadpole or that bird in very human-like language. So I don't think it's just that the child has a good imagination. I think that they are expressing some cognitive and emotional um, content that is very much a part of who they are. So I just want people to just fall in love with nature again and just to have those feelings. And I think it's really important. I really do. And so, um, even though I still give some arboriculture workshops from time to time, I've been doing a few of those, and because I'm just really fascinated with what people have to say about those relationships and working with people who want to recover those relationships.
Jack, do you think it's a part of I'm trying not to, how do I put this? You know, obviously there, I spoke of how I felt and how easy it is, or how much less judgment there is in a young mind. But how important is it that we cultivate that um, throughout our lives, rather than grow up and forget about the kid stuff, and trade that in for scientific ideas and things that we can prove and understand and make money at. Like, obviously we have to survive, but at what cost? I think that so much of that, the conversation with the tadpole, the conversation with the mouse, the things that become insignificant that we don't even pay attention to. What have we really lost? What is the real cost of that? I don't know. Like, how does that manifest itself, not only in us individually, but in society? I think there's a bigger question there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And isn't it interesting that somehow we manage in our educational systems to make biology boring?
Right.
I mean, how is that even possible to make that subject boring? But, it we've succeeded in making it boring. Like everything else that we start out being, you remember going to kindergarten or in grade one, how everything was exciting and this is amazing.
Yeah.
All this stuff, and then it's just over time, it just gets less exciting.
Yeah.
Well, why, it doesn't need to be that way. I don't think it needs to be that way.
No.
But
Well, if you think back to when we met, and I don't know if you recall exactly, Shigo's um, idea behind the tree function education group, as he liked to call it. Um, like, how did he get there? Because a lot of what you're talking about, we had license and freedom to go there in those sessions.
yeah, we sure
Those
did. Yeah.
invitational symposiums, I guess they were.
Yeah. Well, the first time that I met him, I'd been invited to his cottage, and I don't even know how this all happened, but I didn't know anybody. I hadn't met him. There were maybe 4 people or 5 people there. It was Kevin Smith, and I'm not even sure there was a New Hampshire forestry person
Yep.
there of
Yeah.
some sort.
Mary.
No, it was even before I met Mary. I met her maybe like the next fall, but so we were tromping around in those woods by the cottage. So Tony, he had a cottage on Mendham's Pond, near Barrington, New Hampshire, and it was just this just gorgeous, gorgeous lake that they call a pond.
Yeah.
It's bigger than any natural body in Nebraska, right? But almost all of our sizable bodies of water are dammed streams and rivers around here. Um, they call it Mendham's Pond, and everybody was out kind of out in the woods. And the first thing I noticed about Shigo was that he almost never looked at a tree. I mean, actually, just at the tree. He was always looking at what was going on in the soil, or looking at the fungi, or looking at the galls on the tree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I noticed that about him just right away. So as time went on, and I thought, yeah, I got to get next to this guy. And I had just left my academic career, and I just really needed to. Um, I just felt that I really needed to spend my time in the woods in the years I had left, and I was only 45, so I had a little bit of time. And uh, I just needed to spend time with him. And then over the next few years, he just sort of tolerated me going there, and I would hang out with him,
Yeah.
and I would just stay somewhere around there and just try to spend time with him. So one morning, he had said, "Okay, come to my house,
Yeah.
come to my house at 8 in the morning." So I went to his house, and he said, "Okay, the first thing I need you to do is there's these salamanders, these redback salamanders, which, by the way, is one of the lungless salamanders. So they have to get all their oxygen through their skin. All of their oxygen comes from through their skin. They don't have lungs at all." Um, he said, "You got to go find these redback salamanders." So I thought, okay, he needs some salamanders for something, And I said, what should I bring him back in? Do you have a bucket or something? He said, no, just go find him. Just go find them. And so I would spend hours looking for these salamanders. And finally, I figured out how to find the salamanders. So I go back eventually. I'm hungry and go back to the house. And he says, "Did you find some salamander?" I said, "Yep, I found some salamander." He said, "Okay, good. Come back tomorrow." And that was the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you see, later when we had to collect root samples to look at, he's having us look at the Hartig web and the mantle, the mycorrhizal mantle that's uh, on the roots and the glomalin, and trying to understand the exudates and all that stuff happening in the rhizosphere. I know exactly where to look because the exact conditions for a mycorrhizal infection on a red oak is right where you found that salamander, because they had the same requirements. The salamander can only exist because there's a thin film on the body of that salamander to allow the exchange of oxygen at the right level of moisture. And right, it sounds just like a tree root with the musogel and that active rhizosphere that happens in that very bioactive film that's on the surface of that root. So it's that's just good ecology, right? But it's so much more than that. It's so much more. The I think probably the most important learning experience there for me was that it was the connection that I made with those salamanders, those silly salamanders. But there was something that happened in my awareness when I was doing that I later realized the importance of. So I know, Dwayne, you've heard that 100 times, but it's just all if you just think of the tree as the individual, you kind of miss the point, really.
Well, and it's yes, and even I think it again getting back to the human forestry concept. It's very much the same with us. The teachings that remind us to think of others and to help others and to and consider each other's another's path. The whole you don't know what anyone's going through until you walk a mile in their moccasins kind of concept. It's like if you don't have the ability to relate, and I don't know, I guess the word might be humility, to look at it from another perspective besides your own, and to honor that view as much as any, to give it the same value and credence is a big part of the journey, not just in trees but in life, right? And I think for me, I think the trees are a real example of that. The particularly the main example being is they can't flee. That trees, demonstrate the ability to withstand or stay in. Barring physically harshly removed. They're permanent. They're fixed, and they find what they need from their surroundings, and give back. And even in death, their legacy is secure. And the amount of time it takes for the trunk to decompose and everything else. Looking at a forest environment, at least, it's just such a continual cycle. It just is such a loop.
Well, Kevin, our friend Kevin, right? Kevin Smith
Yep.
has, I've heard him say many times that a dead log is full of life.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it may not be live tree cells, but there's live cells in there. There's all kinds of stuff happening,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but going back to this thing about the human forest and something that you were saying, Tony, about the need for a tribe. One of the things that wild creatures teach us, and this is obviously true of trees, and in the sense that you were talking about, Dwayne, a tree lives where it germinates.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the strangest thing in the world for a tree is to be grown in a pot and then planted somewhere, because that's not how it happens. I mean, the evolutionary wisdom of a tree is to grow where it germinates.
Right.
After a tree germinates, they're not going anywhere. That's where they are.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and at that point, they only can live, and the whole life, the length and the quality of the life of that little seedling comes down to its ability to form relationships. That tree is not the only time that tree is an individual, maybe, is when it's an acorn. That's the only point at which it might be self-sufficient.
Right.
And after that, it all depends on relationships. You could say that the tree can only live in a world of friendship. And I have very close friends, and being raised by a person that had this struggle with addiction. One of the things that you find when you talk to people that are in recovery is that recovery really comes down to their relationships, the quality of their relationships, not only with other people that are in recovery, but just, if you think about, if you know somebody that's gone through a 12-step model, and there's that one in there about making amends,
Mm-hmm.
healing those relationships and trying to restore the damage,
Yeah.
right? Well, but the whole process comes down to relationships with the tribe, like you were saying, Tony. But that's true of everyone. That's not just true of a tree,
Yeah. Exactly.
or that's not just somebody that's struggling with maybe a meth addiction or something like that. It's true of everyone. It's true of everyone. And so there are certain beings in our lives, creatures, other living things that teach us that we need to be in healthy, loving, caring, deeply connected relationships. That's the only way any of us are even here doing this podcast right now. We wouldn't be here if we hadn't found some way to do that in our lives, regardless of where we come from. So I started to get so I don't know what that is. Sounds almost like a TED talk, but but or a commercial for Xanax or something. But that's not the point. What's the point? And the interesting thing that I found is that in the work that I do, I mean, somebody pointed out to me the other day that almost all of the people that come to my gatherings and workshops and retreats are women.
Hmm.
And I said, yeah, that's true. Yesterday, the group was, we try not to go over 8 or 9 people for anything we do. And we don't meet indoors anymore, or ever. And so yesterday in the group of 8 people, somebody remarked that there were actually 2 men in the group. And that was like, whoa, like where this guy's come from. But if you want to talk about relationships, the people that talk about that the most easily sometimes and who want to talk about that are women. And that's just who comes.
Well, is that a function of genetics, or is it a function of stereotyping, or
Hell, I don't know, but that's who comes.
yeah?
You know. So it's always amazing. Why aren't there more women who are arborists? I mean, there are lots of women who are arborists,
Hmm.
sure,
Yeah.
um, but and some amazing women that I've met in those circles. It is curious to me, though, that we've got Nadine up there in Banff. I don't know if she's still there.
No, she's retired
Um,
now. She's moved out to
is she?
Vancouver Island.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I sure connected with her. I really enjoyed her. And Wenda.
Yeah. Wenda's been on the show. Yeah, she's been on the show. You can listen to her podcast. And
Oh, really?
yeah, she's been on the show, and she's recently come up with a talk about her story, and she's, I don't know how many places she's gone now with it, but she's delivering it quite well, and it's a very interesting session she does. Um, but she works at a tree service in Toronto, and basically a salesperson. Like she liaisons with the public, and she does do tree work intermittently, like stays involved, but she's doing well. Yeah,
She was working with Andrew, right?
yeah. She works with a different company now. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Andrew's been on the show as well. You can catch him. There'll be a few people you recognize. Like we wanted to get, if Alex was still alive, we'd certainly have him on. I've Judy's agreed to come on,
Oh,
so
great.
we were going to have a session with Judy. She was very
Amazing.
happy to hear you being on the show, and you know, it is, there really is so many connections with people that we're trying to basically go from, the forest that we know, and introduce other trees and other people to each other through this medium, and just to expand the thought model. I hope that people that listen find it provoking, because it can be quite historically factual in some of our interviews about the history and where arboriculture's come from, to more philosophical, like what we're having with you. um, there really is, and simply using the human forest as a theme. But I often wondered what Shigo would muse about if we were to have him on the show, and we'll never be able to
Yeah.
know that for sure. But
Yeah, wouldn't that be
it'd be
something?
quite
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I think you can take his pithy points as a good indicator of where things possibly could go, right? And
Yeah.
anybody
Yeah.
that was at any of his gatherings at his house, which was kind of an invitation type thing that he had, and I don't know what exactly the criteria was, Jack, like why he picked some of us to do that. There,
I don't know. I mean, you think about the group
yeah,
when we met. I mean, that was a collection of people.
yeah.
So,
It always was a different group, and I would often spend time outside of that as well, like you did. Like I'd go and just stay, but it was always interesting. It was very much around parameters. He would be show up at this time, and he would be quite annoyed if you were even a slight bit late, and also not too early. It was very punctuality was part of a
yeah.
thing with him, and then it always would reach an end, a very definitive end. It was never an awkward point of weathering whether you should go. It was like, you have to go now, but you
Yeah,
can
it's
come
over.
again tomorrow morning. You can come again tomorrow morning at 7. Be here at 7, but you have to go now. And,
Yeah,
and,
that's
and you just, it was time to leave. It was just very, okay, I'm leaving now. Well, and
and no matter what we were doing and how many people were there or where we were meeting, he had to leave to go home and walk the dog.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, he would just get up and say, "Okay, I have to go walk the dog," and then he'd come back an hour later. Oh, I miss him so much. Wow.
Yeah, I always found that interesting about him, and the very things that I would be worried about offending someone, is it, and yet I never took offense to when he did it. Like for that example, like, I got to go do this now. I'm going to go do it. I can see you later, but right now I'm leaving, and that was it. It was just very matter of fact.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Gosh.
I've always I think back to as I said earlier, that there definitely is the stopping and looking and taking it all in concept was, um, it's there's a real value in that. The first time I remember it really being impressed upon me was with you, Jack. We were at a site. I don't remember the locations, because I remember we had to get a Starbucks. You needed espresso. And we had that, and we got out of the car, and you leaned against the car, and quite fervently nurtured your espresso. Smelling it, tasting it, warming your fingers on it, on the cup, and then just looking at. So is this where we're going to be doing the workshop? It was, I think, even the day before, and you just wanted to just look. From where we were parked to the entire scene. And I don't know if you were just making an excuse to drink your coffee, but what it appeared to me later was, you weren't just taking it in, like just taking it all in, like looking at the surroundings and the site. And I'll never forget that. I still often will try to do that because get quite task oriented, and so I'll just move into something like very focused. And in doing that, you can very easily overlook the simple, obvious things that might be there.
Oh my gosh. I still wrestle with that, Dwayne. So not this past weekend, but the weekend before, I have a really good colleague and friend that lives in LA, and she's a very successful musician and toured for a long time, and now she has a production company in LA, and but she's very much at the center of the Naturalist School, my organization. And if you can just permit me the story just for a second. Um, so the last full moon of February is the hunger moon.
Okay.
So some people call it the snow moon. The hunger moon, because by the last full moon of winter, everybody's hungry. So if you think about indigenous peoples
Right.
and the First Nations, that was the hunger moon. And you don't have to think very long about why that was the hunger moon.
Right.
And so she came out, she sometimes just flies out and to do a weekend. So we did a retreat together with people, and we sat up most of the night uh, in the woods under that hunger moon. Had a big fire, and she led us through this naming ritual. So, as for many ancient peoples, the beginning of the new year was the spring equinox. So the time that you think about what's going to be happening in this next year is that last full moon, the hunger moon. If you think about the word October or September, those words mean seventh month and eighth month.
Right.
So why is it that in our calendar it's the ninth month and the 10th month? It's because they counted it from the equinox, the spring equinox, not from the winter solstice. So that's why October is the eighth month, because it's the eighth month after the equinox that happens in March.
Right. Right.
Okay. So she said, okay, this is the perfect time to do this naming ceremony. Her name is Laura Byrne. And if you ever want to really hear some amazing music, the name of her band is Mina Birds. And that's the name that she, of her musical group. And she's been everywhere. And she's all over the internet. It's not hard to find her. She's got a Wikipedia page, the whole 9 yards. But anyway, so she said, we sat up under that moon, big fire, midnight. And she said, we have to name our desire. Your deepest desire. What is the work of your soul? What's the soul's work? Your soul. What is your soul's work? What is your deepest desire? Who is it that you are and want to become? give that a name, and that's your name for the next year. That really names what you want this year to be for you. Not only that, but to give you the focus to actually do the things and nurture yourself in the way that helps you grow into that person and feeds your soul. It was amazing.
Huh.
It was amazing. Okay. Well, how long did it take for me to forget that? So the next morning we were going to convene down by the pond in this place at our headquarters, which is in a forested area, about an hour from Omaha, over down by the Missouri line in Iowa. And so other people who weren't able to stay over, it was a very small group that stayed over, and then other people were coming in the morning.
Huh.
So we were going to have this circle. And, I was rushing around. I had to build a fire by the pond, and then we had another fire that was the altar that we were going to use, and we do things like throw things in there, sacrifices, whatever. And I'm not kidding. It took me several hours just even to calm down and to realize where I was. I mean, I was with these wonderful people, these beautiful people who all wanted to explore these deep connections with the natural world. And the pond was like glass. And there were migrating geese flying over, and there were all kinds of birds singing. And, the bluebirds that our winter bluebirds had left and the spring bluebirds had come. It was just absolutely gorgeous. And I didn't notice any of it because I was worried about
Interesting.
everybody having a yoga mat, and who needs to get into the lodge for the restroom, and who is there going to be enough firewood, and gee, I hope people, when are people going to be getting hungry? And I had to think about how to set the food up and all this kind of thing. So I just, I'm a slow learner. I just was all filled up with all these details and all this busy work, and it just took me a little while. Actually, it was our other friend, Katie Twitt, who's our yogi. It was halfway through before I even was able to settle back down into my body.
Right.
So it was, it was really something. It was a really beautiful day, but wow. Yep. Yeah. So even I still wrestle with that, Dwayne. I show up for something, or I've got people coming, and my mind is just filled with all that stuff to get done. And I just forget to even remember and just to take the time just to be in that place and to feel those wild presences.
Well, I think it's we're all guilty of it, or it comes easy. Again, it's one of those things that seems to somehow come through maturity or education. I don't know if those two words should even belong together, but they're oxymoronic, I think. Maturity and education, right?
Well, clearly we were more mature when we were that little kid crawling around in the woods.
Yeah,
That was probably the peak. It's been downhill since then.
yeah. Tony, you've been taking it all in for a while, and more than ever, I'm curious of your philosophical take on where things have been going in our conversation.
Yes, please get us back on track.
It's kind of hard to get on track when there isn't a track, but that's all right.
Yeah.
No, I do have a question though, because I don't, with the both of you knowing Dr. Shigo so well, and I think most people in modern arboriculture are aware of what most people would consider his legacy. I'd be interested, besides what he's known for, Code It, obviously his work. What else would Dr. Shigo's legacy be? What would he want it to be?
I'll venture first. I think that you learned very quickly with Alex that it was about the journey, not the destination, and just to keep asking questions and looking for answers for whatever, and that certainly that applied to trees, but it wasn't limited to that. And and you had to be willing to have discipline and effort. He would quip about roots. There was not a lot known about roots, and he simply stated it was because it's dirty work, and nobody likes to do the dirty work.
It's hard, yes.
Hard, dirty work, and that's the reason why we don't know enough about roots. Like literally, just as simple as that. I mean, if you look at, I don't know that a lot of people really understand I think they think it's old fashioned, or they think he was old fashioned if they even hear anything about this. But the amount of tree work that he did dissecting trees, like he felled the tree and then cut the thing in half, like the whole thing. So the trunk, the scaffolds, like we're talking, and ripping cuts, not just hours on a saw, to get the data that he needed, to get the information that he needed to learn the things he needed to learn. It wasn't. He didn't have. I don't know, Jack. You might know if he ever had people helping him. I'm sure he did, but he did a lot of it himself. So like it was and he would reference. I remember him talking about Linnaeus, I believe it was, studying human anatomy, but he couched everything in botany nomenclature. Like that was his cover, but in the nighttime he would have like guys steal body from the execution area and like cut them up under candlelight and made books and drawings of that. So he would say we need to get down into the mud and the guts of things. So I think, and if you had any time with him at all, that you'd quickly get to that point where realizing he wasn't never pretentious, or he didn't want, it wasn't about selling the books or being known. It was about, like his favorite question was one he didn't know the answer to. That to me sums Shigo up.
I think that one of the people that did some of that work for him was Kevin Smith.
Oh yeah.
When he worked for Alex, right?
Yeah,
So I think that Kevin probably had to do quite a bit of that cutting up of things, and when he was a young guy and coming up through the ranks, and later becoming an amazing teacher in his own right.
Hey.
And and in fact, Alex would get a little bit sidetracked in those dissection seminars, so he would be talking about things, and we'd be looking at things under the microscope and so forth, and then we'd take a break, and everybody would rush over to Kevin and ask Kevin to explain what just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was yep. But I think that's right, Dwayne. I think that that's a big part of his legacy, has to do with just what he used to say, touching trees.
Yeah.
And you remember how he used to say, either the book is wrong or the tree is wrong. Now go break through the ice in the pond and dig some roots from the edge. I mean, he was that pond behind his house. And remember?
Yeah.
And those birch trees would just grow right on the edge of the pond. And he'd have us go in the middle of the winter, and break through that ice and walk into that water and dig that muck, so that we could see that the mycorrhizal activity actually could happen in an anaerobic environment, which was amazing to me. And I don't know that anybody even had published on that yet, but and he said we need to call these mycorrhizae because it was in a anaerobic environment.
Right.
But I think you're right, Dwayne. That would be a big part of his legacy, is just getting your hands on it, getting dirty, learn by touching those trees, learn by looking at those cookies that you can cut. I know it's going to take longer if you've got curious guys that are feeding the chipper, but anything that goes in that chipper is interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Every branch has got a story in it. And I think, yes, I agree. Very much a part of what he would say. And I think also, Tony, the other thing in keeping with what Dwayne said about his legacy, do you realize how seldom it is, and I think this is an affliction that might uh, plague arborists as well, but it's so seldom that when somebody looks at a tree, people will look at a tree and you say, look at this beautiful tree, and they stand in one place and they look at that tree and they say, yeah, wow, that's a beautiful tree. And he was always telling everyone to change your perspective on the tree, to walk farther back and look at it, to walk up close and look at it, to use a hand lens and look at it, walk all the way around the tree, and then walk all the way around the tree the other direction. Do it both clockwise and counterclockwise. He was always wanted people to have this physical relationship and these relationships with trees that were making circles, that made a circle around the tree. And I remember him saying to me that that's why this is philosophical, because philosophy walks around a question. It makes a circle around a question and tries to consider it from lots of different perspectives and at different distances.
Hmm.
And he was always talking about doing that with trees. So in all of his books, when he signed a book for somebody, right in the middle, right there, the only thing he ever wrote in there was, Dwayne, touch trees.
Yeah, or keep touching
Alex,
trees. Yeah,
touch. Yep, it was always about the touch.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's true.
That's what I think of when I think about Alex Shigo.
Yeah, touch trees is
Definitely.
by far the first phrase that definitely comes to mind. Um, it's a little known fact probably that you and Dr. Shigo or Alex were writing a book together at the time of his passing. It wasn't finished. I know
Yeah.
that you did try to finish. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about the book, in particular the name of it, which I found the most intriguing part.
Oh yeah. Well, the name of the book is The Soul of a Tree, and the subtitle then is The Nature of Tree Care. So, and it actually, so we we finished 3 chapters, and he met with his untimely and horrible accident.
Yeah,
But Judy Shigo did publish it.
yeah,
So if you look at the Shigo and Trees website, or if you go to ISA where she might have a table, you can see this wee little book.
yeah,
It's all 3 chapters.
yeah.
But she thought it was important to publish that, and um, yeah, we were working on that, and it basically had to do with what we were just talking about. I mean, everything we talked about today, that's what that was about, those 3 chapters. And in fact, Tree Care Industry magazine um, published some of it in article form back in the day, long ago. This would have been in, I don't know, 2003, 4, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah, what is it was again the beginning of my expanding my concept of tree and tree care um, into the realm of I guess philosophy or thought, and that I always had I would always teach. I remember I would tell my students in college, particularly, that arboriculture isn't just caring for trees. You're caring for the people that own those trees, and it's trying to blend what's best for both. That's the real plight of an arborist, as I saw it. Because what people want to do to their trees, out of ignorance, isn't necessary. You often isn't the right thing and isn't good for the trees. So you're there to try to meet those two worlds and help people understand. And but it's that it was very technically oriented, I guess, for me for a long time. It became or more spiritually focused, I suppose I could say. In that you could impart to someone that you're caring for something that you may own it and it is on your property and so on, but the it's been here longer than you've been alive and will be here long after you're dead. wouldn't you like to care for it with that perspective in mind? And that's something that arborists have the amazing gift of being able to not only work on that specimen, but also to be able to communicate that to people. And the first time I really wrapped my head around this, I think, was when I remember you talking to a group about tree planting, and you made quite a effort you took quite a bit of time to impart to those individuals that what they're doing is of such immense importance to their communities and the whole culture of the fabric of their society, because of what trees represent and what they give to us and the longevity of which they do it for. And it was like you're some of the most important people in your whole city because you're the ones planting the trees. And some of them rolled their eyes, and some of them were like, "Wow, that's a real neat way of looking at it." And everyone's at a different place for different things. But I really impacted me that I don't know if you remember, if you still talk about that, about planting like that.
Well, we still do lots of tree planting workshops, and we have projects that we do. And um, I've been accused of trying to draw it out to be as long of a process as possible. But when you're on a crew and you're expected to plant as many trees as you can in a day, or just get this thing done, right? Or plant the biggest tree possible, which there's lots of reasons not to plant the biggest tree possible. But it kind of falls on deaf ears sometimes when these guys are on the clock. So there was a county crew that I was working with last fall, and I still do some government contracts. They're fewer all the time, and um, went through the whole story and talked about it, and we did an indoor kind of a chalk talk first because it was really cold, and then decided to go back the next day and work on this. But as much as they wanted to really take their time and do it right, they just simply didn't have the time to do it. They were on the clock, and they had a lot of other things to get done that day. And it was way too many trees to plant in a day and do it right, in my opinion. And they did the best they can. They could at that time, and we're working with all these limitations. But I'm wondering, Dwayne, of all the stuff that we've just talked about, and talking about Alex, and talking about the need to lean up against the car and drink espresso, and take in the woods. Both of you, Tony and Dwayne, you're both educators, and you're both you give much or all of your life to training other people. So what is it and this is the work I'm doing. So what is it, do you think, that we can do? What kinds of events or workshops or gatherings or retreats can we offer to help people walk through the forest without a saw in their hand, metaphorically or literally, to think in terms of these relationships and to think about our relationships with those wild creatures, including trees, to help us to be better caretakers of each other and of trees and of the planet. When we offer workshops, the natural thing is for somebody to say, well, if I pay this money and come to this thing, what am I going to get out of it? Or how can I get my company to pay for this? There's got to be some kind of deliverable product at the end of it. So that kind of works against the attitude, the spirituality that we've been talking about. So is there a way for us to, and especially I'm curious about, in the organizations that you work with, is there room for creating this space for people to explore these ideas?
Is there room? What do you think, Tony? Where we in the travels and the groups that we train, I mean, what comes to my mind first, I guess, is that I'd like to know what Tony thinks.
That's right. I saw that bus coming. No, actually, I think there is room, but I think you have to be a little sneaky about it. Because one of the things that I've sort of devoted a lot of my time and training energy to is leadership, right? Because without going down on my rant, I have a feeling that a lot of the accidents or incidences in this industry could be prevented or would be prevented with better leadership and better nutrition and better hydration. But leadership is the one that I can affect a little change on. But the way that works is I think leadership begins with and within you, right? I think there's a lot of people that say, okay, I'm going to become a better leader. And they go off on a course and they take a Tony Robbins course or something like that. And it affects a little bit of a change, but everybody wants to change the world. Nobody wants to change themselves. So I look at leadership from you have to start with yourself. And I think that's where the room is for that. I think that what you're talking about could be a mode, to basically get back in touch with oneself and nature, and then become once a better person and then a better leader.
Yeah, that's kind of a long. That I like that, and because I was thinking along the lines of, we've always provided more than what's on the paper. What the client, like, we have a lot of customers, and some people wonder why, and why we have such long-term repeat customers, and when they hire us once or twice, then they become long-term customers, and then they realize why. And it's not because it goes all back to our trainer, where we have a saying that data doesn't matter. Because it really isn't about what we're teaching, it's how we're teaching it. And that's where, when you're coming at it, no matter what you do, if you're coming at it from a holistic perspective of wanting everyone to benefit and improve for the sake of learning and improvement, and that's your ultimate goal, and which doesn't mean just how to make a chainsaw cut the best, but how to just be a better person, how to be a better steward of everything you do, how you eat, how how that affects how you treat or you interact with your family and friends, how that actually impacts how you do your work, how you interact with your crew, how that actually changes the work as well. That's the part that I think people get from, the type of people that become our instructors, because that's the one common thread that they all have, is that it's not just about the paycheck. It's not, and maybe they're not as far away from the dried up carragana seeds on the floor of the shelter belt on the ground, like they can relate to that, and even the people that are relating to this podcast, uh, the wide range of topics and the varying degrees we go to, from philosophy to actual just hard and fast data on a historical artifact of arboriculture. It's there's we're developing a list of listeners that are benefited from that and crave that, and I think that's well beyond the scope of our control. It'll meet people where they're at, and the right people will hear what they need to hear and get what they need to get. So, but as long as your intention is to deliver that or to do that, and you live that way, and that's where I think, Tony, it comes to leadership 100%, because the best form of leadership is example, right? And if you are living it and you're an example of it, of everything you're saying, then that's what really, I think, gives people pause to listen and maybe even to change.
And I think it's important to remember too that, training comes in levels, right? Like at a very basic level, training or education is awareness, right? Just information. And some training, that's all you need. Then there's, like sort of a skills training, like you physically learn to do something different, and that's important. And I think there's a third level, and that's what we're talking about here. And I choose to call it transformational. It's information, it's awareness and skills that you use to change your life and then teach other people, right? So And not all 3 trainings are suitable for every subject, and not all 3 trainings are suitable for every person, and that's fine. Some people don't come to a training and want to change their life. Sometimes they just want to check the box and move on, and that's okay. Get it? But there's other people that will be drawn into that. Or I often look at it as a funnel, right? You start at the awareness level, you come in, you get a skill level, and then you eventually fall down closer into the flute of the funnel there where it's transformative.
What about you, Jack? What do you think we can do?
Well, I'm a big believer in silence. So regardless of what we're doing in the programs and the things that we offer, even if it's a work day. So, for example, we work with there's a Pawnee holy place that is not far from Omaha, about an hour away. And actually, you could say it's their Garden of Eden. It's the place where creation began in the Pawnee stories. And um, there are oaks there that before the Pawnee were kicked out of this part of the country and pushed down to Oklahoma, uh, there are trees that are still alive on this bluff that are known to the Pawnee from when they lived here and witnessed their sacred rituals on this site. So it has fallen to my organization, fallen to the naturalist school, not only to help to take care of these sacred trees, but to help with regenerating those trees in that forest. So we recently had this work day. So what we do is we collect those seeds because they need to be the acorns from that site, and we have a nursery co-op that we work with that grow the trees according to our specs. And so we do some direct seeding, and then we also plant the 1-year-old seedlings back into the site and put cages on them to protect them from the deer and so forth. And a few weeks ago, or last fall actually, we had 100 or so of these trees to plant and put cages on. And there were some, it was a good year the year before, a good mast year. So there were some wild germination seedlings where the squirrels had buried the acorns, or they just had fallen, or crows or jays had planted them. And we were putting cages on all those too, because the deer pressure is pretty significant. And that's one of the main reasons why the regeneration has been so poor on this bluff. But these are holy trees, and we need to keep those trees going. We need to keep that presence alive, because in so many ways it keeps the Pawnee medicine alive. So we really had a lot of work to do, but nonetheless, people were just working away, and it was our usual gang. And then somebody said, we've been working pretty hard and fast. I think we need to take a poetry break, and we need to make a circle. So we made a sat on the ground in the middle of the woods, just in this clearing in a circle, and we just sat there in silence. We just sat there in silence for a period of time. And then one of my members said, I have a poem that I wrote yesterday that would fit right into this. So she read her poem, and then we sat in silence for a period of time. And then we went back to work. Now, if you're on the clock, right, this seems like might not be too important. Or if you're out working on trees or whatever you're doing, if you have a planting project or you've got to do some removals or pruning, I think finding a way to do that in some way to keep us centered is important. First of all, I don't think as many people would get hurt, because we know what happens when people are in a hurry. And that's when they forget to drink water or stay nourished, or just, right, just to keep not just their bodies, but just their spirits need to have some time. I think it's important. But with regard to helping people to come to this awareness, if we can get people, just get your crew or get whoever you're working with to a place where you can't hear any human sound or minimal human sound. It's not easy to find a place with no human sound, human generated sound, but a place where it's relatively free of that. And then just to help people, give them permission just to relax and listen. Listen to those wild voices. There's so much wisdom and uh, so much love and so much spirit in those voices. It can really help us to rekindle and restore those connections, but also just simply to make us better at taking care of trees. If we can, for a minute, listen to what those trees have to say.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking of that. Like, listen to the trees, and there's lots of schools of thought on that too. But in all seriousness, we talked about early, right from the beginning question about being desensitized as we get older to the the plight of life, money, uh, science, and religion, I guess, and having that change how we view and what we think of things from when we before we were corrupted with those potential thoughts or whatever the word is. But is there a place to find our way back to that, and is that not just uh, a fantasy, but that there is actual a community and communal connection that can take place energetically, spiritually, or whatever with trees, Jack? Is that something you think is something that has also been lost to us? And or is that just, tree hugger talk?
Well, it's been lost to us. It is tree hugger talk, but it's very real. And I have yet to find a person that will take the time with us. I've yet to find a person who will say that that wasn't an important experience for them, that they actually did have a sense that they were getting a message,
Mm-hmm.
that they were receiving an invitation um, to be reconnected and restored. I really haven't. I mean, it's amazing, and it's not that hard, really, to create and hold the space for that to happen for people.
No, I agree.
And one of the things we do, and I think this would work beautifully. I mean, you have turtles up there where you are, right?
Mhm. I
I know you've got
Oh yeah, there's
turtles in
definitely
Alberta.
turtles. Yeah, they're not prevalent like you see, in other milder climates where it's a bit harsh for the turtle here. But yes,
Yeah, so maybe it's not turtles. I mean,
there's
maybe it's a
definitely wood
loon.
frogs and frogs that
Okay,
overwinter
there
and
you
so on.
go.
Yeah.
So one of the things we do is we just get people in a canoe and get them out into that pond or wherever that body of water is, and just tell them that they can't say a word for 20 minutes, and they can't make noise with your paddle. And we teach people how to paddle without lifting the paddle out of the
Hmm.
water,
Yeah, yeah.
so you're not making any sound. I mean, it's very little sound. Um, and we just say you can't make any sound for 20 minutes. And it's amazing what they hear from those turtles.
Hmm.
But it doesn't have to be turtles. It can be frogs. It can be
Yeah.
the trees that are hanging over the water. It just works, and you don't have to do anything really. Is you just say, here are the rules, or go find a fallen log that you find interesting and spend 20 minutes looking at that log, sitting on that log. If the ticks aren't bad, laying next to the log, you know, take off your shoes and socks and just put your feet right there. And it it is absolutely astonishing what happens with people. And you don't have to say anything. You don't have to interpret it. You don't have to explain it. Talk about data don't matter.
Yeah.
Get your shoes and socks off and stand in the sand or walk in the muck and just be quiet to the point where all of that chatter in your head has a chance, like what the Buddhists call monkey mind.
Yeah.
You let all that out. You don't fight it. You just let it just fall. It'll slide right out of your ear and it'll go away. It will. You just give it time, and you know, you don't have to do anything special with your breathing. Just be sure you breathe enough. And most people don't even breathe enough. People don't even breathe deeply. They don't have time. And just just breathe and be. Just breathe and be. Guys, I tell you, I mean, everybody will think that you're some sort of wizard if you just did that with in the middle of a workshop. They'd think, what the hell is going on here? But wow, well, people will talk about, that's the thing they'll talk about. I've been doing this for 20 years, and that's what I find is the most powerful. Just those times that you give people permission just to be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do it where there's a lot of traffic or airplanes. You try to get to where they can hear those birds or just the rustle of those leaves.
It makes me think of what happens and anyone that's particularly a bow hunter, for bow hunting in particular, because you spend hours, in a very quiet place, in a tree typically, or in a blind, like you're in, and you just, you're quiet for hours. And what you notice and what you see and what you begin to hear, it just comes to you. You can't even, I always find it fascinating too, how uh, animals will come to you. Not just deer, which is the reason you're there, but I mean, squirrel will run up the tree. They'll look at you. They'll chip and yell. You'll hear them. They're telling everybody, "Hey, there's somebody sitting here," and the birds will come, and certain ones. And then you can tell ones that are more weary or wary, I should say. They'll show up later from a distance. The big crows, but eventually even the ravens and crows will have to come have a look. If you're there long enough, they will come look. And then you often will do this over a couple, 3-4 days, and it's just it becomes they're very quick to integrate you and to just accept you as part of the place now, right? And I wonder if they miss you when you're gone. I know it's a weird connection to have, but I think it's one of anybody that's an avid bow hunter in particular experiences that, and it's as much about why they do it as the hunting itself. It really becomes. Most of us that hunt, it's not that we have to have we're not. We don't have to worry about the February moon, the hunger moon, but it is a nice alternative to well, that could bring us down a whole other rabbit trail, but even the whole way food is produced and the way that's done, I can't help but think must affect the nutritional quality. And people have talked about that more and more these days of, the
Absolutely.
nutritional quality of mass-produced food. It's really no different than mass-produced protein.
But so Dwayne, you're talking about that experience, bow hunting, and I imagine that you can have a really good day without shooting a deer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact,
Okay,
most of the time you don't. That's the other interesting thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is the thing that I'm talking about. You're in that blind, so that blind is kind of a container.
Well, a lot of times you're sitting on a stand out in the wide open. There's nothing.
Well, wherever.
Yeah,
wherever you are, but that's you've created the occasion for yourself to be quiet.
Right.
Okay. And it might be climbing up on that stand, and then okay, now I have to be quiet.
Yeah.
So just think, if we could take that and you think about that experience that you have in that stand and create that space for people that are gathered together for the whatever reason you've gathered them together.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that helping create that space for them? You can even think of it as a deer stand. You can even think of it as, okay, now we're going to get in the deer stand.
Right.
So what do you do in the deer stand? Dwayne, I think that would be amazing. Just somewhere in a work, it could be at the beginning of the workshop or at the end, but I think that could be a very profound exercise for people. And gee, even let's just have a day where we just do that. So now what I do, so I started, and I was telling you in Alberta at Tabor, I don't know if you remember, but we did that. I did that in Tabor and I did it in Winnipeg, where we had these days or these periods of time where they were just supposed to be quiet in the woods.
Yeah.
And I saw how what that meant to people. So now that's all I do, unless I'm asked to give a pruning workshop or something. And I oftentimes turn those down, or tree anatomy. I just was invited to the Pacific Northwest ISA chapter to do a tree anatomy workshop. And I just said, no, thank you, because this is all I do now. It's just amazing what happens with people. Just helping them find that silence and that connection. And these are people that they can be med students, they can be therapists, they can be arborists, they can be grocery store managers. It doesn't matter what they're doing. It doesn't matter what they're doing with their daily life. So I just invite you to just to try it, because you know what it's like for you, Dwayne.
You got to
and
stop
I'm
and
sure
listen to
Tony
the
did too.
trees so you can hear the turtles.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what a deer stand is for.
Well, Tony, there must be another book in there somewhere.
There's booking everywhere if you want to write it.
Hey, can I just say, just speaking of books, I just want to share with you. So when I find a really good book, I just sort of distribute it to all my faculty and my colleagues in the core group, and we have a fellows program where we have people come, and we have a residency program, and so I'll find a book and I just like buy a crate of these books, and there's just, here, everybody read this book. So the one that I'm just really love right now is called, and I'm going to hold it up right here, but I don't know if this means anything to anybody. So this is Rooted. It's called Rooted.
Rooted.
Yeah, and the author is Lyanda Lynn Hopt, and she doesn't know me. I'm not like selling books for her or anything like that. Lyanda Lynn Hopt. Life at the Crossroads of Science, Nature, and Spirit. And she's an ecologist. I mean, she's a scientist. I tell you, Alex would have loved this book. Yeah, it is, and so some people, in my network, I don't know how this happened, but I have a fair number of filmmakers, and they're just busy all the time, and they're editing, and I mean, they're all self-employed, and they're, it's pretty hectic. So some of them will say, well, I just don't really have time, to read a whole book. It's just hard for me to have time to read a whole book. The nice thing about this book is you really do need to read the first chapter. And she has a really great open writing style. It's very easy to read, fast in terms of just, so you read the first chapter, and that's really important in this book. But then it doesn't matter which other chapters you read or in what order. You can just bounce around. It's a great book for, like, in the evening and you're just relaxing and you're just going to read something. You could just open this book up and just read some pages and you wouldn't be lost. And in fact, you would find something really interesting and fun to think about. So I would, and it just came out in paperback, by the way. So um, that's my pitch. Why am I pitching this book? Just because I think you would really like it. And let me just find this other one I have around here somewhere that you will really like. And again, I'm not selling this book for anybody. It's not like I'm the shill for the book company. Here it is. Okay. This is called A Field Guide to Nature Meditation.
Wow.
And so we were using another book by Mark Coleman. And he's a Buddhist, and he's not ashamed of letting you know that he's a Buddhist. But in this book, it's not really overt. Okay, this is really it's a book of exercises, 52 exercises that just help you notice things. And there are these very short chapters, and he just talks about kind of what would be what he would like you to notice, and then he gives you an exercise to do it. So what I tell with my gang, who the people that I have that lead the workshops for us, and I gave everybody a copy of this, but he's in California, so you have to translate it. He talks about certain animals and birds and places, so you just have to convert it to where you are, like in Pennsylvania or Alberta or somewhere. And it's easy because we're out in the woods, so we know how to do that. We know how, when we see him talking about finding a seashell, well, tell him to find an acorn or a deer shed antler
Right.
or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to just translate it a little bit, but I recommend those two books. I just think they're a lot of fun and would just give you a lot of good ideas about what to do with people in the woods.
Yeah.
That will help them just kind of open up, and if nothing else, it will help them open up to learning new information, because it gets rid of some of that crud that's in there.
Yeah.
The guys sit in the workshop, and you just know they're thinking about everything other than what you're
You
talking about.
gotta crack some of the calcium off of the pineal gland, eh?
Like the prisoners that you used to talk about, Dwayne, the guys that are forced to be there, the prisoners,
Yeah.
and then there's the tourists.
Yeah.
Didn't you say that?
Yeah.
The prisoners, the tourists,
Vacationers,
and the
prisoners, and
volunteers.
volunteers. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So the guys that sit in the back row, right next to the door, they've got their arms folded.
That's right.
Okay, but this will help to kind of loosen that up a little bit.
Yeah. It'll break
Right?
help break the crust off the pineal gland.
Yeah, that's right. Because we got to peel that gland. It's like taking a paring knife and peeling it.
Well,
Yeah.
it's been an interesting foray. The trickle of information that's flowed through this human force today has been interesting and diverse. But I'm really having a hard time, tracing through the whole conversation of everything we've talked about. We've talked about a lot of different things. It's been I wouldn't have expected anything else or anything like.
Well, see, Dwayne, what you need to do is go to the woods and sit quietly for an hour, then listen to it again.
Right.
And then it'll all be
well,
awesome.
it's minus. We've just recently got 30 centimeters of fresh snow on top of about 20 we already had or more, and it's minus 27 degrees Celsius right now.
Oh, perfect. I wish we had that.
It's silent and white, and it's quite calm. The wind isn't blowing either. So, but to go sit out there, you're gonna have to bundle up pretty good.
Oh, sounds beautiful. We're in the worst drought. This part of the country is the worst drought in history.
Wow.
It's never been this dry here, ever. And it's quite ridiculous and insane. It's just we've had almost no snow this winter, and the snow that we had was followed by warm weather. The ground never completely froze here this winter.
It was.
I planted trees the day before Christmas, and 2 weeks ago I planted trees.
Yeah,
and it's absurd.
It was mild here up until couple weeks ago. We've this is what we should be having, but we've gotten it late in the year. But it's definitely welcomed. It's not. It is very beautiful, and the moisture will be much appreciated. But
Well, I'm happy for you. Has it been dry there, Tony, where you are?
No, it's actually been rather wet but warm.
Oh, that's right, because you're getting all those storm systems coming through there this winter. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we've had some snow, but not much. Mostly, it's just been now. It's what we call mud and beer can season.
yeah.
So that's when the snow, what snow we had melts, and you can see all the beer cans, and it turns everything to mud.
We've got beer cans, but no mud. How I wish for mud.
Well, Jack, we always reserve the right to have a guest on again, and could very likely happen in your case. I think there's lots we could talk about.
It'd be great.
And
Yeah.
yeah. So we want to take up all your day. We appreciate the time you've given us so far, and yeah, we should carve out some time to chat just outside of the call anyway.
Thank you so much. You're doing a really great thing here.
Well, thank you, Jack.